I think they want to undo all the changes.
Senate will please come to order. Thank you for your patience. Hope folks recovered from Friday. For today's devotionals, we'll have a moment of silence. Thank you. And thank you to whoever's using the lawnmower who stopped for a moment to give us more peace of mind. We're going to join an unusual circumstance, but normally the pledges each get the pages each get a chance to lead the pledge in the House. Because the House met yesterday, and this may be their last week, we are having the last two pages who have not had a chance to lead the pledge join us today. So please welcome Madeline Paikuch and Tegan Rimmer Tatishev up to join me. And then please all rise if you're able and willing to join for the pledge. Come on up. I may have said their names wrong. They've got the trickiest names of the whole batch. So come on up. Go ahead.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move that the Senate suspend its rules and that H 877 and act related to miscellaneous agricultural subjects be referred to the Committee on Finance under Rule 31 with the reports of Senate Agriculture and Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee.
Now, the senator from Addison has moved that pending entry on the calendar for notice that H 877 and act relating to miscellaneous agricultural subjects be committed to the Committee on Finance with the report of the Natural Resources and Energy and Agriculture Committees intact. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended your rules in order to move H 877 pending entry on the notice calendar to the Committee on Finance. On behalf of the Committee on Committees, I also have a committee of conference to appoint on H 882, the capital bill. The three committee of conferees will be Senator Ingalls, Senator Harrison, and Senator Collmore. We now have a number of bills to refer under Rule 31, the first being H 585. H 585 is an act relating to amending the pension system for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs. It is be referred to the Committee on Finance. The second is H 612, an act relating to miscellaneous cannabis amendments. It'll be referred to the Committee on Finance. H 702, an act relating to legislative operations and government accountability. It'll be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. And H 875, an act relating to the State Ethics Commission and the State Code of Ethics, will be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. We have 7 gubernatorial appointments for reference. They will be handed out to their respective committees before the end of the day. We have 1 House bill for reference, H 889. H 889 is an act relating to compensation for certain state employees. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H 889, an act relating to compensation for certain state employees, Pay Act.
Now, you've heard the first reading of the bill, and under the exception under Rule 44A, which can be found on page 4205 of today's calendar, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Operations. That brings us to the orders of the day. And my understanding is we will be going to page 4051 of today's calendar, and that is H 289. Third reading has been ordered on H 289. 289 is an act relating to the Renewable Energy Standard. Are there any amendments before third reading? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. So H 289, we believe that the wrong time to make proposed costly changes to Vermont's utilities requirements for power purchases. Burlington Electric Department and Washington Electric Co-op are already 100% renewable. Largest utility, Green Mountain Power, is on record planning to be 100% renewable by 2030. Vermont Electric Co-op also has a plan to be 100% renewable. Small municipal utilities are the companies that have struggled the most in the legislative Renewable Energy Standard Committee because they already have contract commitments, and they reported that renegotiating new contracts for renewable energy is increasing in cost, not declining as some claim. Placing more requirements on procurement of renewable energy at this time is not necessary and is not a good idea. The potential costs have not been well developed, i.e. the cost of upgrading distribution system has not been considered, and according to the JFO, could result in a high cost scenario. The environmental and land use costs and the conflicts that we have seen in our communities are also not addressed. Legislation is a missed opportunity to address how we site renewable energy. Let's do better next year. So the first item of amendment in section 2 is 30 VSA section 8002 in subdivision 8 by striking December 31st, 2009, striking out December 31st, 2009, and inserting in lieu thereof June 30th, 2015. Second, in section 2, 30 VSA section 8002, by striking out subdivision 17 and inserting in lieu thereof a new 17 as reads as follows. New renewable energy means renewable energy produced by a specific and identifiable plant coming into service after June 30th, 2015. Subsection A, energy from within a system of generating plants that includes renewable energy shall not constitute new renewable energy, regardless of whether the system includes specific plants that came or come into service after June 30th, 2015. New renewable energy also may include the additional energy from an existing renewable energy plant retrofitted with advanced technologies or otherwise operated, modified, or expanded to increase the kilowatt hour output of the plant in excess of a historical baseline established by calculating the average output of the plant for the 10-year period that ended June 30th, 2015. If this production of new renewable energy through changes to operation, modification, or expansion involves combustion of the resource, the system also must result in an incrementally higher level of energy conversion efficiency or significantly reduced
One moment, Senator from Rutland.
Point of
Senator
information,
from Chittenden Central, what is your point of
I
information?
believe this is one of two. I only have one.
The handout seems to only have one page, but it says at the top, one of two. Is there a second page to the handout?
Nothing?
We'll take a brief recess.
Okay.
Senator, will please come to order. Senator from Rutland, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. So third instance of amendment by striking out section 4, 30 VSA, section 8005 in its entirety. Fourth instance will be striking out section 5, 30 VSA, section 8006A in its entirety and by renumbering the remaining sections to be numerically correct. That concludes my amendment.
Senator from Madison.
Mr. President, during that little break to get the full amendment in front of people, Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, which has not seen this until the floor, unfortunately, was able to meet with council and discuss the proposed changes. I'd say two things. One, they are massive changes to be making on the fly, especially without prior notice, which is kind of difficult for all of us. But the bottom line is it negates, for the most part, the bill that we passed on Friday. And therefore, the recommendation of the Natural Resources and Energy Committee is to vote no on this amendment.
So the question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the senator from Rutland? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The nays appear to have it. The nays do have it, and you have not further amended the bill. Are there any other amendments before third reading? Senator from Addison.
It's not an amendment, but it's
In that-
reported on a question.
So we'll do that when we get this next bit done. Please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H289, an act relating to the renewable energy standard.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was a question on the floor about timing and the transition from the current res to the next res. And the bill is constructed in such a manner in order to do that. And in order to make sure that that was clear, I just wanted to respond to that question and put it into the record that that is the intent. The current res becomes the next version of the res with no gap between the two.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed H289. We will now go up the calendar on page 4042 to take up H614. Third reading of H614 was ordered. H614 is an act relating to land improvement fraud and timber trespass. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H614, an act relating to land improvement fraud and timber trespass.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. Question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H614. We will now continue on that same page with H661. H661 is an act relating to child abuse and neglect investigation and substantiation standards and procedures. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H661, an act relating to child abuse and neglect investigation and substantiation standards and procedures.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H661. We now have before us the next bill on the calendar, which is H847. H847 had third reading ordered. H847 is an act relating to peer support provider and recovery support specialist certification. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H847, an act relating to peer support provider and recovery support specialist certification.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the presenter of the bill?
The senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated as a reporter of the bill.
Thank you. In the testimony that you received, did you hear from currently active peer support workers about the background check requirement?
We did not, Mr. President.
I thank the senator. I've got concerns about this background check requirement. We don't require background checks for licensed clinical social workers. We don't require background checks for psychologists or really any other person providing mental health or substance use care. And it feels like the requirement in this instance is grounded somewhat in stigma. And that just gives me pause. I am going to vote for this because I do think it's an important move forward, but I hope we can come back and address that next year.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H847. I'll now draw your attention to page 3962 of today's calendar. On that page, you will find H534. H534 is read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which considered the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H534, an act relating to retail theft.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Judiciary, the senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. As senators just heard, we're on page 3962. And as a bit of introduction, I just want to say that Retail theft over the last few years, I think, is an issue that all of us have heard about from our constituents. It worries our merchants. It worries people who have other commercial enterprises on our main streets in our downtowns. And it's been a constant refrain. And the Judiciary Committee has tried its best over the last couple of years to find a solution to the problem. Some of the folks that we've listened to, the stakeholders, believe that the $900 limit that divides misdemeanors and felonies is the problem. And they believe that folks who are committing these offenses in repeated fashion are calculating up to 900 and staying just below the limit at a place where prosecutors don't want to prosecute, police don't want to arrest, et cetera. So there have been varied approaches to trying to deal with this, one of which the Judiciary Committee explored a couple of years ago, and that was to try to aggregate offenses so that if you had several offenses under $900, it would crack that barrier. The House, this particular year, came to us with a somewhat similar proposal in which offenses within a 2-week window would be regarded as aggregating. We have heard from the Defender General's office that there are problems with that approach, constitutional problems among others. And so, as you'll see, what we have opted for here is instead a similar approach that we have in most crimes, and that is first offense, second offense, third offense, et cetera, with escalating penalties as you go forward. So what this says now, and by the way, this is the shoplifting statute that we're amending, and the $900 penalty established in the early 2000s. But I think what we're hearing is that there are problems therein. So what the Judiciary Committee wound up recommending is that for a first offense, as you'll see, that be punished by a fine of not more than $500 or imprisonment for not more than 30 days or both. That is a misdemeanor. Second offense, similarly a misdemeanor, be punished by a fine of not more than $1,000 or imprisonment for not more than 6 months or both. But at the third offense, it jumps to a felony. For a third offense, be punished by a fine of not more than $1,500 or imprisonment for not more than 4 years. And then for a fourth offense, that'd be punished at a higher level with imprisonment for not more than 10 years or both. So it is a scale of escalating responses in response to testimony that indicates we're dealing with a very small group in our municipalities that are committing these offenses, but doing so with the relative understanding that there won't be much in the way of penalty if they're caught. So the committee vote, as you'll see, was 4-1-0. It is not a light thing to add penalties of this sort, but we are trying our best to respond to the, I'll call them cries for help from our downtowns. I know in Burlington, the retail theft has escalated to dramatic proportions, with people leaving with shopping carts full of merchandise. So that is the proposal, Mr. President. Happy to answer questions. And as I say, it was a 4-1-0 vote.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank the committee for bringing this bill forward. You know, this has been a problem. I had wished, I'm not going to question the committee's intent. I wish that we just would have done it for instances of just if you stole once, or you stole twice, or you stole 3 times, because sometimes, being a former store owner myself, if somebody takes a bottle of soda from you, it takes you 10 bottles, better than 10 bottles to sell to make up for that 1 bottle that's gone. So any theft is too much, and I would have liked, instead of seeing just the dollar amounts that was there, I would love to have seen just instances of theft And then each time that it was to go up, that the penalties would go up for instances of theft. And that way we wouldn't have to worry about people doing the calculations, these smart criminals doing calculations about how much they could steal before they got into serious trouble. But I appreciate the committee's work on it, and I'll support the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Ready for the question? Senator from Madison.
May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
Senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated as the reporter.
Thank you. The last comment left me a little confused about the bill, and so I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. It's not, the total value is not in excess of 900 for each of the offenses, correct? So if someone steals a bottle of soda, it would be less than 900. They do it a first offense. The first offense would be the $500 fine, not more than 30 days. Then if they stole a second bottle of soda, it would be a second offense. Am I understanding it correctly, Mr. President?
You are. My colleague from Essex, I believe might be confusing it just a bit. So these are all offenses at not in excess of $900. So $400, $300, $200. These could be prosecuted under this scale of punishment. If it goes over 900, then we're in the already existing statutory realm.
Okay, great. That's what I understood. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you. I thought this was a terrific report, actually. I believe I heard you say that on the third offense, they'd be punished by not more than 4 years, and it's in the bill, it says 3. So I'm just curious. I'm assuming it is 3.
Yeah, I'm not remembering if I misread that, but it does say 1,500 or imprisonment for not more than 3 years or more.
Right. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
I would just add, Mr. President, that those ranges are left to judicial discretion, given the fact pattern. So if someone stole a bottle of soda, I find it hard to believe that they would get prison time. It would be probably near the bottom end of that spectrum.
We would hope. Thank you.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Ready for the question? If so, Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since this is not necessarily my area where I understand all of the context, I wonder if I might inquire of the presenter of the amendment.
Senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated as the reporter.
Mr. President, is there a different track for those who are under 18 years old or 21 years old?
We do have youthful offender and juvenile laws that have separate tracks and separate disclosures to the public.
So anyone under 21 years of age would not be facing these penalties?
I don't believe it's under 21 at this point. I think it would be under 19.
Okay. Mr. President, did the committee hear from the Office on Racial Equity?
I have the witness list, if you will bear with me. We did not hear from the Office of Racial Equity. We did hear from Rebecca Turner, Appellate Division Office of the Defender General.
Mr. President, was there discussion of how wide the discretion is at each level and how one person could be punished far more within a up to 10-year period than another, and how that often leads to disparities in the judicial system?
We often do, and I believe did in this case, talk about judicial discretion and also the possibility for racial disparity.
And Mr. President, finally, if I am understanding correctly, the House passed version and what is in our calendar, it looks like the House passed version looked specifically at repeat theft, which as an economic development committee, we often hear is a bigger challenge, that someone can keep going back to the same location with impunity, and the House passed language where that adds up to a greater offense. Did that get taken out in the Senate version?
As I said in my report, we are also concerned here with repeat offense. So first offense, second offense, third offense, fourth offense. So both proposals are grounded in trying to mete out stiffer punishments for a pattern of offenses. It's just, we didn't use a clock of 14 days or an aggregate. We used instances of offense.
Okay, I thank the senator. Mr. President, certainly as the chair of economic development, we have heard about retail theft issues and we take it very seriously. We were long awaiting the work of the Senate Judiciary Committee on this matter. I won't speak for anybody else, but I hoped we would thread the needle a little bit more on the wide disparities that can exist in terms of who is accused of stealing a bottle of soda or a backpack, and the length of sentencing or the level of punishment. And I do worry that in many of these instances, there is significant outweighing of the punishment that could be levied for a much smaller crime. So I have those concerns, and I just hope we watch this extremely carefully as it moves forward and better understand any disparities that might arise in how this is implemented. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. Yeah, the ayes do have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Judiciary. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered third reading of H 534. We'll now be taking up S 30. S 30 is passed the Senate. It has passed the House with a proposal of amendment. And the pending question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? I believe the senator from Wyndham would care to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will speak to the bill as amended by the House and the further proposed amendment by your Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs Committee. The House proposal and the Senate proposal begin on page 3963, with the Senate proposal beginning on page 3965. As you may recall from last year, S30 would allow the establishment of up to 5 sister states hosted in the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and formalize the process that is now authorized by executive order. The purpose of the program is to create intentional relationships with states in varying regions of the world to foster understanding and collaboration through cultural exchanges that benefit both Vermont and the sister states. The House amendment creates a working group to determine which agency would be best suited to host this program, and it proposes the ongoing funding of the program. So the working group would propose the ongoing funding. The House included the Vermont National Guard in the sister state working group because of the Guard's established experience and relationships with foreign states and countries such as Northern Macedonia, Senegal, and Austria. The proposed Senate amendment would change the House amendment in 3 ways. It adds 3 members to the working group who have experience in educational or cultural exchanges or international affairs. The governor, the Senate, and the House would each select one of these 3 members. It adds a goal of the program to promote peace, human rights, and environmental sustainability. And it changes the compensation language so that non-legislative members are reimbursed for expenses from funds appropriated to ACCD, and that legislative members are reimbursed for expenses from General Assembly appropriations. So being respectful of our time constraints, I won't go through the entire section outline, but I would like to highlight in the calendar where the changes are. So if you look on page 3966, under section 1B, membership, and then the 7, 3 members with experience, that's where that amendment is shown. And then on page 3967, 4B is the addition that the program promote peace, human rights, and environmental sustainability. And the compensation and reimbursement begins at the bottom of page 3967 and continues to 3968. And it's both 1 and 2. And there is a typo that will be fixed where it says Department of Commerce and Community Development. That'll be changed to agency. We don't need to vote on that. And I want to point out, so those are the 3 amendments that are suggested by the Senate. Some notable changes from S30 last year. I want to point those out also. So on page 3967, the top, section 1, it says which department and state government is best suited to administer, house, and provide support to the program. The agency did not have as much support for hosting the program as they had previously. So this working group will decide which department is best suited. And then number 3, the sources of funding that will financially support the program. That's critical because we need to have that in place before we initiate a program. And that will be a particular benefit of having the National Guard as part of the conversation because they currently have funding for all of their activities through the federal government. And then just I want to point out 4C, also on page 3967, which I thought was a beneficial amendment from the House, which is that the program foster the connection of immigrants and refugee communities in Vermont with their nations of origin. And that is my report. We received testimony from the Vermont National Guard, Senator Ruth Hardy, the sponsor, Representative Michael Marcotte, and Legislative Council. The vote was 4-0-1, and I am happy to answer any questions. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to get back to the recommendation. Your Senate Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs recommends that the Senate concur with the further proposal of amendment. Thank you.
I am going to state the question. I just want to clarify as we do some of these curious things that we don't do very often. This amendment is from individual senators as listed on page 3965. It is technically not a committee amendment. And committees certainly can take votes on any amendment offered by senators, as you often do, just for clarification. So the senator from Wyndham and others move that the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on S30 with further proposal of amendment as found on page 3965 of today's calendar. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have concurred with the House proposal of amendment with further proposal of amendment as found on page 3965. I believe you are passing over H121, which brings us to H644. H644 was read for the, is a, let me double check 1 second. Got it. H644 is read for the first time, referred to the Committee on Government Operations, which consider the same and recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H644, an act relating to access to records by individuals who are in foster care.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Government Operations, Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President, H 644 came to your Senate Government Operations Committee and appeared to be a simple little bill. This bill would have allowed former foster youth to access their DCF records and youth who had judicial involvement to access their court records when they are an adult. As with most simple little bills, it quickly became apparent that this bill was neither simple, and after your Senate Government Operations Committee amendment is no longer quite so little. We heard compelling testimony that the records of youth involved with DCF can be a critical part of understanding what happens to them and for their healing and moving forward with their lives. As a social worker, this makes absolute sense. When our own story is unknown to us or vague, it can be difficult to heal from the trauma we may have endured. There's great value in the validation of our experience. And currently, when an adult reaches out to DCF to see their records, DCF has to turn them away. We worked incredibly hard to thread the needle on this bill to protect the vulnerable, follow federal privacy law, and give access to people's records and stories so that they may heal and move forward. The strike all amendment can be found on page 4011 of today's calendar. Generally, it permits the disclosure of DCF created records to adult individuals who are in foster care or subject to juvenile judicial proceedings as a minor. The presumption is that individuals who are the subject of the records requested may be permitted to review such records so that they can more fully understand their own personal stories and be recognized and trusted as legitimate custodians of their own information. Section 1 of the bill makes substantive changes to 33 VSA 4921 by adding a new subsection G entitled Disclosure to Adults that were subject to foster care placement. Subdivision 1 is an intent section that establishes a state policy solidifying an individual's statutory right to know their own DCF records so as to understand their own personal stories, including their health, education, family, and other history. To access their own healing in their own chosen way. It sets DCF on a course to make good faith efforts to disclose records in support of this goal and balances such disclosures with federal and state laws mandating information that must be withheld. Subdivision 2 is the substantive portion of the DCF obligation to disclose DCF created records at no cost to an individual, provided that the subject of the records requested is 18 years of age or older and as a minor was placed in foster care or subject to any juvenile judicial proceedings under Title 33. Subdivision 3 provides DCF discretion to withhold or redact information that if released could present a substantial likelihood to compromise a person's safety, an active law enforcement investigation, or where the requester is the subject of an abuse or neglect allegation themselves. This section of law is also amended by making technical changes to the statute throughout with the addition of reader assistance headings and gender neutral language updates. Section 2 of the bill amends 33 VSA 5117, which concerns the disclosure of court records of juvenile judicial proceedings. The presumption is that these proceedings are confidential and such records are segregated except as provided in 5117. Subsection B of the statute permits the disclosure of such records in certain enumerated situations and to specific individuals. The bill adds a new subdivision N to subsection B, largely mirroring the additions to 4921, which state that records are permitted to be disclosed to an individual who is the subject of the records sought, is 18 years of age or older, and as a minor was subject to any juvenile judicial proceeding under Title 33. This bill, in my view, is a starting point. It doesn't go far enough to ensure that children who've experienced trauma are able to better understand and heal from that trauma when they become adults, because this bill only applies to those who were placed in foster care or had juvenile judicial proceedings. It leaves out many people who may have a real need to access their DCF records. For example, a district director recently had someone who was sexually assaulted as a child and asked to know how DCF handled their case. Because they were never placed in foster care and did not have any juvenile judicial proceedings, this bill would not give them access to those records. However, this bill makes an important step forward, and I know there's a lot more work to do, and I want to thank the Senate Government Operations Committee for taking this up, the Office of the Child Advocate, the Department of Children and Families, and Legislative Council for working to find a compromise that we could take this step forward. And I especially want to thank the brave individuals who came to us and shared their stories and helped us arrive at this starting point. The vote in committee was 6-0-0, and we asked for the Senate to concur.
Now you've heard the report of the Committee on Judiciary. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? If so,
It's the Committee on Government Operations.
that's fascinating. As a matter of fact, it is. My apologies. You all serve on two committees and apparently my brain is still tired from Friday. You've heard the report of the Committee on Government Operations, which worked really hard on this bill. It was not the Committee on Judiciary. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Government Operations? My apologies, Madam Chair and committee. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have adopted the report of the Committee on Government Operations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H 644, which came out of the Committee on Government Operations. We now have up for consideration S 191, it's found on page 4018 of today's calendar. The standing question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal amendment? Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, I apologize. The Committee on Education is taking additional testimony on this. I did not inform the President Pro Tem, so I'd ask that we pass over it.
Without objection, we will pass over S 191. We now have up for consideration H 707, which is found on page 4022 of today's calendar. H 707 was referred to Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, which consider the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill was then referred to Committee on Appropriations, which also considered the bill and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 707, an act relating to revising the delivery and governance of the Vermont workforce system.
Now you've heard the the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. You'll find our strike all amendment on page 4022, if you're interested in following along. This is an act relating to revising the delivery and governance of the Vermont workforce development system. So workforce expansion and development has been a top priority of the legislature and of the governors for many years. Even before COVID, we knew that across every sector of our economy and in every corner of our state, we were facing a workforce shortage. Over the last several years, the Vermont Department of Labor has reported in their monthly newsletter over 10,000 job openings. We heard that referred to in our previous bill last week about licensure. One of the reasons we're updating some of our opportunities in licensure. That number is improving slightly and most recently had dropped to roughly 7,500 job openings. As we know, this is due to our demographics, our aging population, housing shortages, lack of childcare, and a post-COVID reluctance to return to the workforce. State and local governments, for-profit and nonprofit businesses all have struggled to fill positions. For businesses, this has been particularly challenging as it means they're open fewer hours, or it prevents them from growing and seizing new market opportunities. And this for Vermont has an impact on our revenues. Our current workforce system evolved during a time when there were plenty of workers, but not enough jobs. Now we have the opposite challenge. We have plenty of jobs and not enough workers. This new reality calls us to adapt in order to meet the current needs of employers and those seeking employment, including young people, new Americans, veterans, and BIPOC individuals whom we want to retain and attract to our state. We need a workforce system that helps individuals move through the workforce, building their skills and providing growth opportunities as they progress through their careers. Our demographics demand we do more with less. So let us seize this opportunity as an opportunity. Let's seize this as an opportunity to ensure all Vermonters have every chance to contribute to increased productivity through continuous skill building in a truly integrated system. For many years, the Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs Committee, along with our colleagues in the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development, have made incremental changes to address the structural and system challenges we face. Vermont has scores of terrific workforce development programs, both in state government and out, managed by nonprofit partners and run by individual businesses for their own needs. In addition, we've created several programs to expand our workforce, like our remote worker program that the senator from Franklin and I are such cheerleaders for, and stay-to-stay programs. However, a major concern has been the lack of coordination between all of these independent programs and services and across agencies and departments in state government. 2 years ago, we passed Act 183, which established the Special Oversight Committee on Workforce Expansion and Development, SOCWID. This group of 5, State Representative Michael Marcotte, Chair of House Commerce, Kendall Smith from the Governor's Office, Chair of the State Workforce Development Board, Adam Grunwald, and Jay Ramsey, who runs our Vermont Department of Labor workforce area, and yours truly. We were charged with examining systems that govern and administer workforce programs around the country and to recommend changes to the delivery and governance of Vermont's workforce system. We were able to, with a very generous appropriation from the legislature, we were able to hire Boston's public consulting group, who worked with us for almost 2 years, reviewing innovative systems across the country and recommending models for Vermont to consider. We focused on 3 states quite similar to ours, Maine, North Dakota, and Utah, each having a slightly different model to explore. And the testimony we received was incredibly helpful, and we explored a number of options before settling on the recommendations contained in H707. Embodied in these recommendations is our hope that the workforce governance structure we recommend in H707 will create the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, whose function would be to coordinate all workforce initiatives in the state in one robust and accountable system. Elevate the importance of workforce development through this new office with an experienced executive director who reports directly to the governor and is a cabinet member, perhaps someone who has worked at a high level in another state, we'll see, and create a comprehensive statewide workforce strategy with oversight authority, reduce duplication, this is a big problem, reduce duplication and eliminate gaps in delivery, support comprehensive data alignment through state government and with nonprofit partners who receive state workforce development grants, improve resource integration to meet individual and business needs, and create a primary and authoritative voice in the executive director who will set statewide workforce priorities for the governor and the legislature to consider each year. Let me send you to the bill. It's not that long, and I'm going to just cruise through these sections. Section 1 creates the Office of the Workforce Strategy and Development within the executive branch. This office will have support from the Department of Labor and have 2 full-time staff positions, both of which already exist in the Department of Labor and in their budget. So there's no new appropriation in this bill. One of these staff positions will be the executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. The executive director will report directly to the governor, elevating the importance of workforce, and will be responsible for coordinating efforts of workforce development in the state, developing strategies for comprehensive and integrated workforce education and training, and oversee the affairs of the State Workforce Board, among other duties. The governor will have the power to appoint the executive director with advice and consent of the Senate. Section 1 continues in amending the makeup of the state workforce membership of the State Workforce Board. Membership on the board at the moment is an unwieldy 63 members. We are going to amend it down to 26 members. Remember, this is heavily federally overseen because of the Workforce Innovative Act. And so for every new person government person we bring on, we have to bring on 2 people in business. So we worked really hard to bring this down to 26 members that represents all the people that need to be represented. Importantly, a majority of the board members will remain business representatives as required by federal law. Next, the bill creates an executive committee of the State Workforce Development Board, which is made up of a small number of board members. The executive committee recommends to the board changes in its bylaws, among obviously other duties. The Senate Committee on Economic Development made 2 changes in this section from the version that passed the House. The first was changing the name of the office from the Office of Workforce Expansion and Development to the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. And the second was removing the duty of the Executive Committee of the State Workforce Board to suggest recommended qualifications to the governor for the new position of Executive Director for Workforce Strategy and Development. This was added, as you'll see in a minute, to the duties of the SOCWED, which is we're asking to reauthorize, that's addressed in Section 4. Section 2 of the bill amends session law from 2022. Dates are updated in the regional workforce expansion system pursuant to other changes made in this act. The committee did not amend this section. Section 3 creates a task force wherein the executive director of workforce development will consult with the executive committee and the Agency of Digital Services in regards to developing a data trust as outlined in the final report of the SOCWEDs, which I'm happy to share with anybody who'd like to see it. The report is due back in December of 25, and the committee did not amend this section. However, Section 4 is completely amended because we decided that we would like to reauthorize the SOCWED instead of creating a whole new workforce that was going to take another year. We wanted to do this in short order with people who knew what they were talking about and who were ready to rock and roll as of June 1st. So Section 4 amends our Senate committee to change the working group reviewing workforce leadership legislation to the special, back to the SOCWED, the Special Oversight Committee. The SOCWED was originally created, as I said earlier, in 2022 to address the workforce development issues that this bill aims to solve. SOCWED is now being reauthorized to review the effectiveness of the language in 10 VSA 540, which that section in law is critically important because it identifies where the leadership and duties are of workforce education and training and where they're set forth. It will work out and recommend who's responsible for what, and that it continues to be an issue that we need to work on. And the House didn't have time to do it, and we didn't either. So that really important of who's going to do what needs to be, that work needs to be done. As mentioned earlier, it will also consult with the Department of Human Resources to develop qualifications to suggest to the governor for the Executive Director of Workforce Strategy and Development position. Again, appointed by the governor, but in many of the other things like judicial nominating, sending a list of people who are qualified. Section 5 sets forth a transition period for the State Workforce Development Board due to the changes that we've made in it. I really want to thank Kendall Smith, Commissioner Harrington and his staff for collaborating with us, the House Commerce Committee, Chair Marcotte and his committee for their work on this bill. They worked really hard on it. And our Senate Economic Development members who made the final revisions to this bill. We ask you for your support in this ongoing and evolving work and landscape and look forward to realizing the changes that many of us have been wanting to see come to fruition for many years. Our vote in committee was 5-0, and we heard from a whole range of people, from the reporter of the bill to the chair of the State Workforce Development Board to the Commissioner of Labor and the sponsor of the bill, the chair of House Commerce, one of our partners from the Public Consulting Group, our Director of Workforce Development in the Department of Labor, our Policy and Legislative Affairs Director at the Department of Labor, and our own splendid Legislative Council. So we ask for the Senate's support as we make changes which will significantly advance Vermont's workforce system. Thank you so much.
The bill is then referred to Committee on Appropriations, which considered the same and recommends that when the bill is amended as offered by the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, that it be supported. Senator from Washington. Senator from Washington.
Are you ready for the report from the appropriations? Committee?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Well, I am also ready to give it, so thank you. Your Committee on Appropriations reviewed the bill for expenditures of the state. The SOCWID that was mentioned, the Special Oversight Committee does give compensation. The legislative members will be paid for their per diems from the General Assembly budget, and the non-legislative members will be paid for the budget from the Department of Labor. So there's no direct appropriations from the general fund of the bill. So we found that favorable, and so we recommend the bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee of Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. And due to the creative and efficient work of our clerk, the vote was called and the vote was unanimous 7-0.
So the current question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've adopted the report of the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H 707. That brings us to page 4031 of today's calendar, which is H 794. H 794 is read for the first time, referred to the Committee on Government Operations. The committee then considered the bill and recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 794, an act relating to services provided by the Vermont Veterans Home.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Government Operations, Senator from Franklin.
Mr. President, H 794 is existing law. We hope to add to this, the Vermont Veterans Home located in Bennington, Vermont. Services provided there to those who live at the home, which is the key to this, for those who reside at the home, include long-term care, short-term care, memory care, respite, hospice, and outpatient rehabilitation. Eligibility is veterans, spouses, or widows, Gold Star parents. This facility usually serves up to 100 individuals. A 30-bed wing facility construction project is anticipated to start in January of 2025, adding 30 beds. And presently, there's been 30 beds taken offline just due to the lack of staff and the cost of agency nursing. So if I might, at this time, could I read a quick letter from the ED of the White River Junction Medical Center?
Without objection, you may.
Many of our northern Vermont veterans must travel more than 2 hours if they wish to access Vermont Veterans Health Services. Unfortunately, this is prohibited for many and their options remain limited. As veterans, family members, and their loved ones seek options to support their well-being, Vermont Veterans Hospital has been a wonderful community partner in the Bennington area. The bottom line of this bill is there's a long waiting list for entry within the facilities. And this bill seeks to allow the Vermont Veterans Home to consider expanding services outside of the veterans home. And now on to the bill. Section 1 adds 20 VSA 1714, powers and duties of the Board of Trustees. This amends the powers of the Board of Vermont Veteran Homes to 1, permit the home to offer services to Vermont veterans who do not live at the home. It also allows them to contract for professional services needed to provide care to Vermont veterans who do not reside at the home. It provides or coordinates services and supports in a home or community setting to Vermont veterans who do not reside at the home. It provides or coordinates housing for Vermont veterans, once again, who do not reside at the home. That sounds kind of duplicate, doesn't it? It provides contract. What it wants to do is contract with public or private entities to provide services, support, or housing to Vermont veterans who do not reside at the home. We've added to this section under section 116 to, if I can find it here, establish the authority to establish a nursing home in Vermont to provide services and support to veterans who do not reside at the home, provided that the nursing home shall comply with all applicable state and federal licensing and regulatory requirements. The key here is they've lost a wing. They're going to be adding one on. They've lost 30 beds due to staffing shortages and so on and so forth. And there's many folks who travel from all over the state, especially from the northern part of the state, who do need their services. So you wouldn't have to be a resident of the home to obtain these services. So that's the key to this. And secondly, Section 2 makes the amendments to permit the use of the Vermont Veteran Home Funds in relation to the new authority granted in Section 1. The effective date is July 1, 2024. This came out of your hardworking Senate Gov Operations Committee on a vote to 600, and we ask for this Senate support. Thank you.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which considers the same and recommends that when the bill is amended as offered by the Committee on Government Operations, that the bill ought to pass. For the report of the Committee on Operations, Senator from Bennington.
We also, over the years, worked very diligently with the Vermont Veterans Home to make it the best it can be. And we're very happy with the progress made from 10 years ago. I want to focus on the veterans actually came about from the Civil War, with the old soldiers home. And it's located in Bennington. And the services should be statewide. So on the vote of 601, the Senate Appropriations Committee urges the Senate support of the bill.
You've heard the report of the Committee on Appropriations. The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Government Operations, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have adopted the report of the Committee on Government Operations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Franklin.
I apologize, Mr. President. I'd be remiss in not listing the witnesses, which was Gary DeGaster, President of the Board of Trustees of the Vermont Veterans Home and Chair, Governor's Veteran Advisory Council. The sponsor of the bill, Rep. Robert Hooper, reporter from the House Committee on Government Operations, Melissa Jackson, Chief Executive Officer of Vermont Veterans Home, Damian Leonard, Legislative Counsel, and Rep. Mary Morrissey, the sponsor of the bill. Thank you.
Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a bill that is long overdue. My first encounter with Vermont Veterans Home was in 2005 as state auditor, and we did a lot of work at the Veterans Home. I got to visit the home a lot, and it's something that if any of you have never been there, some of you have never been there, it's a place that you ought to try to visit and see what happens. It provides superb services to veterans, particularly veterans who are obviously in late years, often without any other support or any other family. It's become a home because of its location in Bennington that is heavily occupied by veterans from Massachusetts and veterans from New York. The veterans from Northern Vermont often have not had a place to go, and this fills that void. And it's something that we've talked about for more than 20 years, and it's well overdue, and I'm very glad to see that in this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've heard third reading of H 794. We now have for consideration on page 4032 of today's calendar, H 871. H 871 was read for the first time, was referred to the Committee on Education, which recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to Committee on Appropriations that considered the bill and recommends that when further amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 871, an act relating to the development of an updated state aid to school construction program.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Education, the Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Education Committee, I bring you H 871, an act related to the development of updated school aid to school construction program. So last week was kind of a tough week for education, but we're heading back into the topic again today, and hopefully this is a bit less contentious. This is another bill in the piece of the education modernization effort. You're invited to follow along on today's Senate calendar on page 4032. And I'll give you an overview of the bill's history. There's quite a bit of legacy, a strong legacy here. First, step one. In 2021, Act 72 commissioned a statewide inventory and assessment of all state public school buildings. The purpose was to inform the legislature on the extent of school facility needs that had accumulated since the state school construction support was suspended in 2008. Prior to 2008, a state funding bridge was available to school districts. So then step two, in 2023, Act 78 created the School Construction Aid Task Force to take the assessment info and make recommendations back to the legislature on a new state program assisting school districts with funding and planning for facilities upgrades. One interesting finding in that task force was that Vermont schools currently spend a combined total of $170 million per year on facilities in their capital budgets. The industry benchmark for facilities maintenance and refreshment is roughly 7% of current replacement value, which brings you to $570 million per year required to maintain schools. So again, backpedaling just a second, the districts currently spend $170 million per year, and the industry benchmark is $570 million per year. So you see about a $400 million delta between the two. So this brings me to step three, which is this bill. So this is a direct derivative of the School Construction Task Force and compiled largely through the work of the House Education Committee led by Representative Peter Conlon from Madison County and his very capable committee. The bill came through to the State Education Committee in very good form. Chair Campion led us through the review and enhancement of the bill. And just as a heads up, there are some bill linkages here, not direct linkages, but kind of soft linkages. The first one being a direct link with the development of a statewide education vision, which as of last Friday was outlined in section 1 of the yield bill. Not sure if that survived the weekend, but we'll find out over the next few days. The yield bill is H 887, references the efforts of this school construction bill H 871. So separate topics, separated, but obviously both related to the future of Vermont's education system. So what's the problem? The problem is Vermont's education footprint consists of 17 million square feet of building area in 384 buildings that have not been state supported since the construction renovation program ended in 2008. The total estimate, and this came out of the assessments needs, which again was kind of the history as it led up to this bill. The total estimate needed for a 21-year period, for the next 21-year period, is $6.4 billion for current known infrastructure school needs. This is an average of roughly $400 million annually to maintain the existing portfolio of buildings. Of this, 1/4 is projected to come from state funds, and the remainder come from district bonding. Of this $6.4 billion, $228 million are immediate needs, failed systems, issues of health, safety, and security. So that's the problem. Solution, this bill is one of the elements of the solution, again, in conjunction with potential sections of the yield bill. And I hear there might be a state school funding bill moving through committees or what have you. So there may be 3 different elements to the solution. This is one, and this is obviously directed specifically to school construction. So quickly step you through the bill. Section 1 through 5 updates 16 VSA 3441 and creates a facilities master plan grant program. AOE is tasked for developing the standards of disbursement of the funds subject to the following requirements. The agency shall develop a prioritization formula based on the applicant's poverty factor and average facilities condition index score. Second, the agency shall give prioritization to applicants with a regionalization focus that consists of more than one supervisory unit or an independent CTE district that apply together. So kind of a overt effort to, again, try to consolidate for efficiency's sake. AOE is tasked with developing minimum requirements for the facilities master plans to include space utilization, identification of new programs, and, as you would expect, student enrollment predictions. The AOE report is due on December 31, 2024, and then annually thereafter until the implementation of the grant program. Section 2, Facilities Master Grant Program that would sunset in June of 2029. Section 3, AOE to coordinate with DGS to develop pre-qualification criteria for project consultants and architecture and engineering firms that specialize in K through 12 school design and construction. And then section 4, which is really, again, I like to focus you on the heart of the bill. This is the heart of the bill. And this is standing up the school construction working group to create a vision. The membership includes, very simply, 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, and the Secretary of Education. Please. The group's mission is to study and recommend a plan for statewide school construction aid program to include recommendations on implementation to address the following topics: the governance model for state aid construction, the prioritization criteria to drive funding towards projects that align to the state's overall education policies, use of incentives, focus on environmental hazards and contaminants, which of course is, we're all familiar with the PCB problem. Current laws and impact they may have on school construction, and fiscal modeling. The working group is required to consult AOE, ANR, Department of Public Safety, Natural Resources Board, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, the Division of Historical Preservation, the U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Agricultural Rural Development, School Board Association, superintendents, principals, NEA, Vermont Bond Bank, etc., and Vermont's congressional delegation. The working group shall have the assistance of AOE, Office of Legislative Counsel, JFO, and Office of Legislative Operations. The recommendations are due to the General Assembly on or before December 15, 2024. And most importantly, this report comes in the form of proposed legislation. So it's not resulting in a study that we can't action. It results in action that we can deliberate. The funding for the school construction working group was originally estimated at $15,000 for per diem, because again, it consists of 6 members of the legislature. But I'm sure that there was some action taken by the Appropriations Committee. Now, section 6 is related to the topic, but it's a little different. So I'm kind of want to highlight it just a little bit. And that is that current law requires that if a state construction contract exceeds $500,000, it must advertise its bids. This raises that threshold to $2 million. This came at the request of AOE. It secondly, allows the school board to choose from less than 3 bids. Problem is they're not getting 3 bids, so it allows them to choose from less than 3 bids if less than 3 bids are received in response to the request for proposal. And that simply allows them to continue traction. The effective date of the bill is July 1, 2024. Testimony very quickly came from Representative Conlon, who's a sponsor of the bill, AOE Director of Operations, AOE School Facilities Program Manager, and AOE's Director of Legislative Affairs, BGS, Vermont Bond Bank Executive Director, NEA's Executive Director, Principals Association Executive Director, School Boards Association, an energy efficiency company, several school board members, several principals, the Deaf Vermonters Advocacy Services, Deaf, Hard of Hearing and Deaf Blind Services Director, Vermont Legal Aid, our own, Beth St. James, Vermont Office of Legislative Counsel, and Rick Siegel, also from Legislative Council. Vote was 5-0-0. We welcome the chamber to join the Education Committee in supporting H 871. Thank you, Mr. President.
Bills entered for the Committee on Appropriations. For the report of the Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Chittenden Central. Senator Baruth. For the report of the Committee on Appropriations, as found on page 4041 of today's calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President. As senators will see on top of page 4042, we have suggested striking out 10 meetings and inserting in lieu thereof 6 meetings unless authorized by the Speaker and President Pro Tem. We think of that as the Alice Nitka approach. She was skeptical of any amount of meetings over 6. And then in the second instance of amendment, to delete section 5. And our committee vote was 7-0-0.
So the question is, shall the report of the Committee on Education be amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. And you've amended the report of the Committee on Education as offered by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Education as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Education as amended. Question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If you're ready for the question, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H 871. We now will move on to page 4042, Bill H 81. H 81 was read for the first time, referred to the Committee on Agriculture, which considered the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 81, an act relating to fair repair of agricultural equipment.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the committee, the senator from Chittenden North.
Thank you, Mr. President. H 81 is the right to repair bill for agriculture and forestry. The state of Colorado was the first out of the gate with a Fair Repair Act for ag equipment. Our act covers forestry too. This bill is about preserving a farmer's right or a logger's right to fix equipment they own or to bring it to a local repair shop, rather than wait for an authorized dealer to assist them. If your combine breaks, your whole crop could spoil by the time your scheduled appointment with an authorized technician rolls around. As the saying goes, you've got to make hay while the sun shines. And you can't make hay if your equipment is giving you an error code you can't translate as it refuses to start. Kind of like my car sometimes. For years, original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, have been keeping their diagnostic software and tools proprietary. With the passage of H 81, owners of ag or forestry equipment could access tools, parts, and diagnostic software from the OEM at a reasonable cost and in a timely manner. Being able to get the tools or parts needed to repair a broken tractor themselves is a birthright for every Vermont farmer, is it not? This bill does not force manufacturers to give diagnostic software, hardware, or parts away free of charge.
the customer still pays. Rather, this bill mandates that OEMs provide owners the goods at substantially the same terms and costs as to equipment dealers. With the passage of this bill, equipment owners needing a repair wouldn't be held to someone else's schedule at someone else's price. Recently, several manufacturers have entered into right to repair memorandums of understanding with the American Farm Bureau Federation. These MOUs appear to help farmers repair their equipment, but they are not legally binding. At any time, a manufacturer could choose not to honor an MOU, nor are all manufacturers signing MOUs. Hence the need for a law like this that protects all farmers and loggers' rights to repair. I'll refer to the bill as found on the amendment as found on page 4042. Section 1 contains the finding of hurts. On page 4044, you'll see the abbreviated title established. On page 4045, you'll see the start of section 3, which is quite lengthy. First, it defines terms used and to what extent there is a right to repair ag and forestry equipment. On page 4046, the act creates a duty for manufacturers to make available parts, tools, and documentation to owners and independent repair providers. Finally, on page 4047, this act names the Attorney General as the enforcement mechanism. There were a couple of tweaks we made on the Senate side, and the biggest one I would say was we removed the right of private action in our version of the bill. On page 4049, you'll see that this act would take effect on January 1st, 2026. Your Senate Agriculture Committee would appreciate your support of this amendment. We received testimony from 18 different witnesses, and it passed out of committee 5-0-0. Thank you so much.
This question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Agriculture? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Agriculture. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Senator from Windsor.
Thank you. I'm not going to channel the senator from Orange. I would like to thank the committee for passing out our right to repair bill. I am also channeling the former senator from Burlington who was passionate about right to repair. I love right to repair. It is such a Vermont value. Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. And I think this is a terrific start. Thank you very much, Senate Committee on Agriculture.
Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H 881. We now have on page 4048, Bill H 745. H 745 was read for the first time, referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which considered the same and recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 745, an act relating to the Vermont Parentage Act.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Judiciary, the senator from Windham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our Senate Judiciary proposal of amendment is available on page 4049, today's calendar. The Vermont Parentage Act was enacted in 2018, and its purpose was to modernize our antiquated parentage laws. It was anticipated that after a number of years, legal practitioners who work in the field of law would return with additional suggestions and tweaks, which is what we have before us today. Overall, the act has received substantial positive feedback, but there are some additional changes that have been suggested so that the work can be done more smoothly. Before I do an overview of both the underlying bill and our amendments, I do want to add that none of these changes affect parents' rights or responsibilities, such as care, control, and custody of children. That's a different area of law. Rather, the act sets forth the policy and procedures for how a person is determined to be a legal parent of a child. So I'll provide an overview of the underlying bill that was sent to us from the other body. Section 1 is the definition section. Section 2 refers to parentage proceedings. So current law requires a person who files a parentage proceeding to provide the person's social security number to the court. The change to this section adds language which states that a person only needs to provide a social security number if they have one. Section 3 refers to adjudicating competing claims of parentage. This section addresses how a court must use the best interests of the child standard when there are competing claims of parentage. Section 4 refers to challenges to presumed parents. This addresses situations where a person may challenge the legal notion that someone is a presumed parent under law. A person is presumed to be the parent of a child if one of 4 situations exist. 1, the person is married to the birth parent at the time of birth. 2, the person was married to the birth parent at the time of conception. 3, the person married the birth parent after the child was born and is named on the birth certificate. Or number 4, the person resided in the same household with the child for the first 2 years of the child's life, and the person and another parent of the child openly held out the child as the person's child. The language is intended to address the ability of either a birth parent or a presumed parent to challenge a presumption after the 2-year time limit when the presumed parent is not a genetic parent, never resided with the child, and never held out the child as the presumed parent's child. I'm going to provide an example that I think will clarify this. But our current law does not grant standing to a birth parent to challenge a presumption of parentage after the 2-year time limit. So here's the example. The Office of Child Support presented a case where they encountered where a married couple divorced and the wife had a child with another man. The ex-husband knew about the child, but was not the genetic parent. He never resided with the child and never held out the child as his own. However, because the child was conceived while the exes were still legally married, the ex-husband was presumed to be a parent of that child. So this amendment would provide either the presumed parent or the birth parent with standing to challenge that presumption. Subdivision B3 allows a person with standing to challenge a presumption if the child has more than one presumed parent. Subsection C clarifies that if there are 2 presumed parents in addition to the birth parent, the court should adjudicate parentage based on the best interests of the child. Section 5 refers to adjudication of parentage if the birth parent is the only other parent. This section clarifies the process when there's only one presumed parent in addition to the person who gave birth to the child. Section 6 refers to the standards for adjudicating someone as a de facto parent. A de facto parent is someone who has cared for a child and holds the child out as their own, but may not otherwise be recognized as a legal parent. This section makes a technical change to the standards for adjudicating someone a de facto parent. Current law in this section sets forth the standard for adjudicating someone as a de facto parent in subsection A. The amendment to subsection B refers the court back to the standard of the best interests of the child if there are competing claims of parentage, and clarifies that a child may have more than 2 legal parents. Section 7 refers to consent to assisted reproduction. This section addresses situations where a person becomes a parent through the use of assisted reproductive technology, known as ART. This section clarifies that a person may show their intent to become a parent through the use of ART, either through a written record or an oral agreement between the parties prior to conception. Section 8 contains a grammatical amendment. Section 9 refers to the effect of dissolution of marriage or withdrawal of consent. The amendment for Section 9 is intended to allow a person who has filed for divorce to proceed with ART 60 days after filing for divorce. And in such case, both parties to the marriage will only be considered parents if agreed to in writing after the commencement of the divorce. So this language allows a person to move on with having a child while a divorce is pending without the presumption that the person's ex will be considered a legal parent of that child. Section 10 refers to birth and parentage orders. This section addresses when birth and parentage orders are issued when a child is born through the use of ART. The amendment says that if parentage is uncontested and everyone is in agreement as to who the parents are, the court shall issue the parentage order promptly. Section 11 refers to eligibility to enter a gestational carrier agreement. This section addresses the conditions under which someone can enter a gestational carrier agreement, otherwise known as a surrogacy agreement. Subsection A requires that a person who intends to be a carrier has a medical evaluation that includes a mental health consultation. Subsection B currently requires persons who are the intended parents to complete a medical evaluation and a health consultation. So there's a bit of duplication there. The Other Bodies Committee replaced that requirement to include a psychosocial education and counseling related to the gestational carrier agreement, which seem to more clearly reflect the intent of ensuring that the intended parents understand the conditions of entering into such an agreement. Section 12 refers to parental rights and responsibilities. This section addresses a scenario if a gestational carrier is a known family member. Currently, if genetic testing indicates a genetic connection between the carrier and the child, the court is to determine parentage. The amendment exempts those situations where the carrier is a known family member, since it's actually not uncommon for a family member to agree to be a gestational carrier for a child for other family members. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer them for that. Section 13 refers to birth and parentage orders. This section addresses when birth and parentage orders are issued when a child is born for a gestational carrier. The amendment says that if parentage is uncontested and everyone is in agreement as to who the parents are, the court shall issue the parentage order promptly. Section 14 is the effective date. So that's what the other body sent us, and the following is what Senate Judiciary proposed as an amendment. The first instance of amendment changes 15C VSA 802F. This change clarifies that a surrogacy contract is enforceable if it substantially complies with state statute. The second instance of amendment changes 15 VSA 293. Makes several changes to that section. And this is to clean up old language in Title 15 to reflect the changes that were made to Title 15C 2018 with the adoption of the Vermont Parentage Act, and Section 13A. So the amendments to 15 VSA 293 are meant to bring it into alignment with the Vermont Parentage Act. The change to subsection B references a prior parentage law that was repealed with the passage of the VPA. It also suggests that a party can simply object to a presumption of parentage, and the court will then address parentage as part of the complaint, which is no longer permissible under the Vermont Parentage Act. The next change is to 15 VSA 294. This section repeals the outdated man in the house statute because it's no longer the practice of the Office of Child Support to establish support orders unless parentage is also established, or if there's a legal basis for the court to adjudicate parentage under the Vermont Parentage Act. The next change is to 15 VSA 295. This section is amended to remove reference to 15 VSA 292, 596, and 597, which had previously been repealed. It also removes the cross-reference to 294, which is the man in the house statute. It also adds reference to the Vermont Rules of Family Procedure 4.1A, which governs service of a complaint to establish parentage and related obligations. The amendment also seeks to remove gendered terms in consideration of the fact that an action brought under this chapter may be filed against another parent, regardless of their gender, in alignment with the Vermont Parentage Act. The change to 15 VSA 7807 contains a technical amendment to remove a cross-reference to two repealed laws, the old parentage law and the URESA, which was superseded a number of years ago by the Uniform Interstate Family Support Act, which is codified in our Title 15B. And the last change to 15C VSA 808A, this is just a companion to the first instance of amendment regarding the enforceability of gestational agreements. The vote in committee was 5-0-0, and I ask for the Senate support.
So the question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank the Judiciary Committee for repealing 15 VSA Section 294, the quote unquote man in the house section of the statutes. I discovered this last year during my research for the child care bill. And in the very original version of the child care bill, we also amended this section and changed it to be less offensive. It's sexist and antiquated, and I'm really glad that we're striking it from our statute. So thank you, Judiciary Committee.
Question is, shall the Senator from Windsor?
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the presenter of the report?
The Senator from Wyndham is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
I'm not familiar with the term held out, like a child, when a child is held out. What does that mean in reality?
So that's when the court looks at the different facts and circumstances with how a adult or parent is showing that they're a parent. So are they taking them to school? Are they buying clothes? Are they doing the things that a parent does for a kid? That's essentially what holding someone out as your child.
So it's not necessarily just a statement of, I believe I am the parent. It is actions that are taken that you would normally consider a parent would take.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Judiciary. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered third reading of H 745. We'll now continue on to page 4051 of today's calendar. And on page 4051, you'll find S 58. S 58 is an act relating to public safety. The question is, the bill has been returned from the House with a proposal of amendment. The standing question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe we've lost the chair of Senate Judiciary on the virtual feed. So I would ask that we pass over this and move to S 184.
Without objection, we will pass over this and move on to S 184. S 184 also has been returned by the House with a proposal amendment. S 184 is found on page 4064 of today's calendar. It is an act relating to the temporary use of automated traffic law enforcement systems. The standing question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate concur with the House proposal amendment on S 184, and if I may, discussion of that motion to explain what changes were made by the House briefly.
That is the standing motion, and you have the floor as recognized.
Thank you. The House made a few changes that obviously in our motion to concur we agree with, but I'll tell you really quickly what they are. They added section 1 of purpose of the automated traffic law enforcement. So it's clear why we're doing this temporary project. They added some clarity around who is going to be storing the data on here, that it would be the Agency of Transportation and not Department of Public Service. The House made several changes where we had public safety and they changed it to AOT. The public safety was just kind of worried about having to manage the whole program. So often where we had something to be done by the Department of Public Safety in consultation with the Agency of Transportation, they just switched those two around, whereas the agency is going to be doing it in consultation with public safety. They added some more language about how the automatic traffic law systems will be verified, that the calibration laboratories had to be independent, that the data log provides some other information like verification of the signs that are required, the name of the employee that verified the system was going to be operational. More changes to agency than the department. So the penalties and the limitations are all the same, which I think were key issues that we discussed when it was presented. And they also made a change that to make sure that the information disseminated would be in other languages other than English, to update that with and that they would consult with the Office of Racial Equity and Language Services to determine the appropriate languages for translation, to make sure we're taking care of that. So that's the report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal amendment on S 184? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have concurred with the House proposal amendment on S 184. We now have up for consideration. Yes, Senator from Chittenden
I would
Central.
move that at this time we stand in adjournment until until I receive from the Senate Secretary my motion. Okay. Before I make an adjournment motion, I would like to move that we suspend our rules in order to message our actions on a series of bills from this morning. H 289, an act relating to the renewable energy standard. H 614, an act relating to land improvement fraud. 661, an act relating to child abuse and neglect investigation. H 847, an act relating to peer support provider and recovery. And S 184, an act relating to temporary use of automated traffic law enforcement systems. And I would also like to include in that movement S30, an act relating to creating a sister state program.
Now, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message the following bills to the House forthwith. S30, S289, H289, H614, H661, H847, and S184. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to message your actions to the House, the bills to the House on the following bills forthwith. S30, an act relating to creating a sister state program. H289, an act relating to the renewable energy standard. H614, an act relating to land improvement, fraud, and timber trespass. H661, an act relating to child abuse and neglect investigation and substantiation standards and procedures. H847, an act relating to peer support provider and recovery support specialist certification. And S184, an act relating to the temporary use of automated traffic law enforcement, ATLE, systems. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. A good morning's work, and we've cleared much of the calendar. I had planned to go till 12:30, but today is barbecue day. And that is set up out on the front lawn. So with that in mind, my intention is to adjourn now and come back at 1 p.m. to continue our work, pending announcements.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a reminder that we are having a celebration for the retirement of Senator McCormick this evening at the Vermont Natural Resources Council building, which is on Baldwin. It's from 5 to 7 p.m. You're all invited. It would be lovely to see you. Hopefully we are not in committee or on the floor at that time. There will be light refreshments. And if you don't know where that building is, you're welcome. I think some of us are walking over. It's just down the street, like 6 buildings on the right. So we hope to see you there.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education will meet once we finish our work today, but if we are able to gather our attorneys just before 1, we will be in touch. Thank you.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. The miscellaneous tax bill committee conference will meet at 12:30. You have to bring your lunch. And we will meet again immediately following adjournment. I believe after today, we have 10 bills to get out.
Any further announcements? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Government Operations will also meet this afternoon after we adjourn. We have bills to get out as well. Thank you.
Any further? Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Needless to say, I believe there's also a committee of conference meeting on the budget, and there's transportation. So Senate Democratic Caucus will not meet, but I would encourage, we have our new caucus director to introduce you to. I also would encourage people to look at the yield bill, the fiscal note. There's lots to update, but it's also all moving so fast. So I know you're just so disappointed that we're not going to meet, but we are not, and we'll just work on informing each other of how things are evolving. So thank you very much.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate now adjourn until 1 p.m. today. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand adjourned until 1 p.m.